Hi, welcome to ACCQ Continuing Professional Education. This time we're going to talk about a subject matter that is an important part of the financial statements. So ito yung statement of cash flows. So aside from the statement of financial position, statement of operations, so ito yung isa sa pinakamahalaga, kung hindi man pinakamahalaga, especially sa may-ari, no? Kung may pera pa, no? Iyan yung pinag-uusapan diyan. So we're going to talk about that. So like we said, we're going to talk about statement of cash flows. Now, before we move on to the proper lesson proper, let me just give you the technical knowledge na makukuha natin dito that we will gain from this session. First is that to understand the nature and purpose of a statement of cash flow. Ano ba talaga itong cash flow? No? Bakit ba napaka-importante nito? Especially sa mga may-ari. Kaya nga na sinabi natin kanina sa opening, no? Kasi nandito yung pera, yung datong. Next is to understand the concept and components of cash and cash equivalents. Now, dito sa PFRS, no, yung yung line item, hindi lang siya cash but cash and cash equivalents. So itong cash and cash equivalents, it is derived from the cash transaction, the cash flow transaction. So ito yung mag-a-appear dun sa balance sheet, no? Okay, so make connection yan in a way. So yung cash flow is the detailed transaction involving the cash. Now, another thing is yung cash equivalent. Ano ba yung composition yan? Kasi yung cash, alam naman natin, pera. But yung cash equivalents is another thing. These are highly liquid assets. We're going to talk about that and its classification as we go along. Next is to know the classification of cash flows as operating, investing, and financing. So as you can see even on the screen, dun sa slide na to, makikita natin, no, yung nakaturo, yung cash flow. So pinaka nandun sa taas yung operating activities, no? So ano ba ito? Ano ba yung pinagkaiba niya sa investing at saka doon sa tinatawag na financing? Okay, so statement of cash flows. Yan. A statement of cash flows is a component of financial statements summarizing the operating, investing, and financing activity of an entity. So ito yung mga activities. These are the activities that revolve around the cash flow, that generate cash flows, no? Yung operating, when you talk about operating, you're talking about the main operations of the business, no? Whether it is in merchandising, manufacturing, or service. When you talk about investing, these are practically located doon sa middle of the asset section. No, or dun sa may sa latter portion ng asset section, which is non-current assets, no? Now you will see here yung mga building na binili or nag-invest ng lupa, those non-current assets. And of course yung financing activities. When you talk about financing activities, you're talking about the equity section as well as yung non-current liability section of the company. How they manage, let's say, to get a loan from the bank, no? So these are, or let's say, finance their operations by way of issuing shares, no, or yung dividends. So those are part of the financing transactions. In simple language, this statement of cash flows provides the information about the cash receipts and cash payments of an entity during the period. So yung pumasok at yung lumabas. Yan yung no? Siyempre, bago may lumabas yan, kailangan may pumasok muna. So, kailangan mas malaki yung pumasok kaysa sa dun sa lumabas, no? Kasi paano nga naman ba lalabas yung yung pera kung wala namang pumasok? So, kailangan may pumasok muna na mas malaki, tapos yung lalabas hindi ganoon kalaki. Or at least yung bang hindi kasing laki nung pumasok, no? Para naman may balanse pa. Ika nga, no? So yun lang yung pinaka gist ng cash flow. Yung perang pumasok at yung perang lumabas. Simple as that. And an entity shall prepare a statement of cash flows and present it as an integral part of the financial statements for each period for which financial statements are presented. So napakahalaga nito, no? Especially sa when you report sa SEC or sa BIR, no? So kailangan it's a complete set of financial statement including statement of cash flows. And the primary purpose of a statement of cash flows is to provide relevant information about cash receipts, payment, and cash payments of an entity during the period. So, ano yung nangyari doon sa loob ng isang taon? Yung perang pumasok, yung cash receipts, at yung perang lumabas during the period. Anything that involves cash. Cash and cash equivalents. Let's talk about this, cash and cash equivalents. Ano ba ito? Lagi nating naririnig to. It's a line item doon sa statement of financial position, no? Nakalagay doon as cash and cash equivalent. Hindi lang siya cash ngayon, but may cash equivalents. Now, the statement of cash flow is designed to provide information about the change in the entity's cash and cash flow statement. So mamaya gagawa tayo ng mga yung statement na yon, no? Okay, we'll start of course doon sa beginning of the cash balance or cash and cash equivalents, and then we move forward hanggang doon sa cash payment provided from operations, cash provided from the operations, tapos yung cash payments from investments, at pati yung sa equity. So we're going to show you in a little while. The next, cash comprises cash on hand and demand deposit. Yung bang pera at yung cash in bank, no? Yung demand deposit, no? So those are part of cash, no? Okay, as the title suggests. Now, cash equivalents, ito naman yung mga short-term, highly liquid investments that are readily convertible to known amount of cash, usually mga 3 months or less, no? Okay, which are subject to an insignificant risk of change in value. Kumbaga, napakaliit na yon, very immaterial na siya para bang yung balakid niya na hindi siya maging cash, no? Okay, so very insignificant risk. PAS number 7, paragraph 7, provides that an investment normally classifies as cash equivalents only when it has a short maturity of 3 months or less. So you can only classify that as a cash equivalent if these highly liquid investments are in the range of within 3 months or less. E paano, let's say kung isang taon yung investment pero binili siya within 3 months. So does that classify as cash equivalents? Yes, it will still classify as cash equivalents kasi binili siya within 3 months, no? Okay. E paano kung binili siya 8 months tapos naging 3 months na lang? No, that is not classified as cash equivalents. Okay, now, so we're going to talk about more on the cash equivalents, no, in the coming sessions. I think I've also had a video here about cash equivalents. No, you may check it out. Examples of cash equivalents: we have 3-month BSP Treasury bill. No? Okay. Next is yung 3-month BSP Treasury bill purchased 3 months from the date of maturity. So ito yung sinabi ko. So kahit nasabi mong 2 taon pa yan, yung BSP Treasury bill na yun, if it was purchased 3 months before the maturity date, then that is still considered as cash equivalents, no? Alam mo itong mga BSP Treasury bill, no? So ano ito? Kumbaga napaka-safe ng investment nito, yung mga ganitong investment, no? Because hindi na ganun ka significant yung mga fluctuation nito, no? And 3-month time deposit. So these are also part of the cash equivalent. Tapos yung 3-month money market instrument or commercial paper. So that also. Now, let's talk about classification of cash flows. So we have three. So cash flows are inflows of cash in cash equivalents. Okay? So the statement of cash flows report cash flows during the period, classifying it as operating, as you can see here dito sa picture sa slide, no? Medyo natatakpan ng picture ko dito, no? Okay, so cash operating activities, investing, and financing. Okay, now let's talk about operating activities, cash flow from operating activities. Okay, so operating activities are the cash flows derived primarily from the principal revenue producing activities of the entity. In other words, operating activities generally result from transactions and other events that enter the determination of net income or net loss. Okay, so ito yung mga ito yung operations mismo nila, no? Okay, yung mga, let's say, mga receivables na nakokolekta and then turn into cash, no? So those are part of operating activities. Or ito yung mga let's say yung mga sweldong pinapasahod, no? So cash outflow naman 'yon, no? So pampabawas 'yun. So normally nakikita natin 'yun doon sa we see that, no, may English pa. It's because we have viewers who are also who wants also more than often than that they want me to speak in English, no? Okay, we'll try, no? Okay, so these are cash payments, now that you can see under or below the gross profit line, no? So these are operating expenses such as what I've mentioned a while ago, yung itong cash pay, yung sa salaries, no, even utilities. So practically the cost of doing business, no? Okay, so those are part of operating activities, and as well as yung the revenues that comes into the company, no, from the sales. So those are part of the operations. Examples of cash from operating activities include cash receipts from sale of goods and rendering of services. So it's either from a merchandising or a service, even manufacturing, no? Okay, so sale from royalties, cash receipts from royalties, rental fees, commissions, and other revenues. Okay, so for example, merong copyright, no, or yung royalty na yon. So those are part of cash receipts from operating activities, as well as rental, no? Okay, so these are also operating activities, yung fees, commission, no? Okay, so and other revenues. So they are considered as operating activities. So normally you will find yung operating activities doon sa in the asset section, particularly current assets section. While yung payments naman, you will see that in the current liability section. Cash, like such as this, no? Cash payments to suppliers for goods and services. So these are like accounts payable. These are actually additions to the cash flow. Why? Because cash payments is a deduction from the cash flow of the company, because lumalabas yung pera. But the incurrence of the accounts payable is an addition to the cash flow. Why? Because once the company incurred an accounts payable or a liability, there is an automatic deduction in the form of, let's say, accounts payable, or which will be reflected, or purchase which will be reflected in the income statement as a deduction that will consequently decrease the net income. So that should be added back. So we're going to take more on those things now. I believe I have done some of the videos on cash flow, not because this is practically a primary discussion on cash flows, no? Okay, and then next is cash payment for selling, administrative, and other expense, no? Okay. Over expense. Okay. That is actually the French word for other. No? So that's other expense. No? Okay, so cash payments for selling, administrative, and other expenses. So these are like for example, yung bang selling expenses like freight out, no? Let's say if it's delivered, the goods are delivered to the customer, no? Or let's say administrative, like the salary of the employee, no? And other expenses. Cash receipts and payments of an insurance entity for premiums and claims, annuities, and other benefits. Okay. And then next is yung cash payments or refunds of income taxes, specifically identified with financing and investing activities. And so those cash payments, no, or refunds, no, so they are also considered as part of the operating activities as, you know, deduction to the cash balance. And then cash receipts and payments for securities held for trading. Let's move on to investing activities. Now, investing activities are the cash flows identified from the acquisition and disposal of long-term assets. Yan, halimbawa, bumili yung company ng long-term assets, like for example, a building. No, so that is a cash outflow. Now, upon the sale of that same building, that is an inflow, no? So that is normally located doon sa ano. Nice ko lang yung banks ko. These are normally located in the non-current section of the balance sheet. In other investments not included in the cash equivalents. No? Example of cash flows from activities, investing activities, cash payment to acquire property, plant and equipment. So kung bumili ng property, plant and equipment, no? Okay, this is an outflow. Okay, labas ng pera. Cash receipts from sales of property, plant and equipment. So yun nga, no? Pag binenta naman yun, that is a cash receipt, no? So dagdag yun sa cash flow. Cash payments to acquire equity or debt instruments of other entities. Let's say, for example, they bought shares from San Miguel Corporation. No? Okay, so these are held as current or as long-term investments. So those are part of for investing activities. Kasi mga companies, no, they also invest in other companies, no? Okay, especially big corporations. Cash receipts from sale of equity of that instrument of other entity. Oh, that was good. Okay, so cash receipts from sales of equity or debt instrument of other entities. Wala ako doon. Cash advances and loans to other parties other than advances and loans made by financial institution. So mga cash advance, no, and loans as well. Okay. Like we said, investing activities na dun sa may non-current portion niya. So cash receipts from repayment of advances and loans made to other parties. Ayan. Okay. So these are part of investing. So any transaction that is not identified with the operations, no, could be considered as an investing activity, or it's not also identified as a cash flow from financing activity, no? Doon sa may equity portion ng balance sheet, no? Such as yung issuance of shares, no, or yung proceeds from a bank loan, no? So this is captured dito sa investing activity, no? Okay. Okay, so let's move forward. And then cash payments from futures contracts, forward contracts, and option contracts. So what transaction is this, no? So normally, let's say a business would enter a forward contract, no? When you see forward contract in the future or future contracts, no? Okay, so let's say they would buy an equipment, let's say outside of the country, let's say for $10,000, no? So the spot rate now, let's say it's $10,000, no? Let's say the exchange rate is 40 or 50 is to 1. Okay, 50 pesos is to $1, no? So let's say ngayon, no? Okay, now 30 days from now when the company entered into a forward contract, no? Okay, yung ano na yon, yung kung ano yung spot rate, kung ano yung rate na yon, yung 50, no, regardless whether it increase the peso weakens or lumakas yung dolyares, no, naging 52 is to 1 na lang, no. Okay, they will still pay the supplier outside of the country at 50 pesos kasi that is a forward contract, no. Okay, so parang they also kumbaga nag-hedge sila, no. So this actually I made a video on this forward contracts, no. So if you want to check it out, so there's a video there na dito sa ano na to, sa channel na to, no. So these are practically yun yung pa rin yung binabayad na. So these are part of investing, kumbaga nag-invest sila dun sa forward or futures contract, no. Okay, para lang kumbaga sa para maprotektahan sila dun sa fluctuation ng exchange rate, no. Okay, and then finally we'll talk about financing activities. So what are these financing activities? These are the cash flows derived from the equity, capital, and borrowings of the entity. So if they borrow, let's say from the bank, no, and the proceeds they got from the bank, which is let's say long term, let's say for 5 years, that is considered as a cash flow from finance activity. The money that they will receive from that bank, so the cash proceeds, is considered as cash flows from finance activities, and as well as the equity, no. Okay, the equity, let's say they issue stocks, no, or shares of stocks, no. So that is from finance activities. So example of cash flows from finance activities, cash receipts from issuance of ordinary and preference shares. So like we said a while ago, when the company or the corporation issues shares of stock, no. Okay, because some corporations would issue, like for example, Jollibee would issue shares of stock to its investors, no. Okay, in order to procure money. Okay, so that is a cash receipts from issuance of ordinary and preference shares. Cash payments to acquire treasury shares, no. Okay, so treasury shares is the company's own share that is being bought back, no, by the company. Okay, so next is yung cash receipts from issuance debentures. These are unsecured loans. Okay, notes, bonds, mortgages, and other short-term or long-term borrowings. And so when the company contracted a loan, no, in the form of, let's say, a bond or a mortgage, no, so they issue bonds for the proceeds of the money. So the difference between cash receipts from ordinaries and preference share and cash receipts from the bonds, no, it's because yung magic is because the cash flow from, by the way, I'm in Sanford right now, no? So there's this the Golden Gate Bridge, no, like the sea. Okay, so the cash flow dun sa pag-issue ng bonds or mortgage, no, the company is the kumbaga dun sa pag-issue ng shares nila dun sa mga stockholder, they are considered as kumbaga yung bang investor. Dito naman yung mga, of course, yung bumili ng shares, dito naman yung mga pinag-issuean nila ng bonds, they are considered as creditors. So they will pay in the form of yung interest payments, no. Okay, so next is cash payments for amounts borrowed. Well, obviously that is especially if it's a non-current liability, no. So yung proceeds done would be considered as cash flow from financing activities. Cash payments by a lessee for the reduction of the outstanding principal lease liability. So cash payments to settle such obligations as trade accounts and notes payable, income tax payable, accrued expenses and operating activities, not financing activities. So financing activities are the cash flow derived from the equity. Okay. I think we have done this, no, already. Okay, now let's proceed with this one. Okay, so this one, which is the statement of cash flows. So as we can see, these are assumed amounts. So papakita lang natin kung saan kung paano yung format ng statement of cash flows, no? Okay, so we'll start with the cash and cash equivalents. January 1, so that is for 3 million. So these are net cash provided by the operating activities. So these are divided into cash received from the customer, so from operations yan, no, yung accounts receivable na nakolekta na, for example, no. So or let's say it's a cash sales, no, so 12 million. Rent received for 1 million, interest received. Okay, so for 1.5 million, especially these are short term, no. Short term yung pinanggalingan. Dividend received. Okay, so if they receive the dividends, no, okay, from other corporations, so these are also part of operating activities. So cash paid to suppliers, no? Okay, so pag nagbayad sila doon sa accounts payable nila, no? Okay, so that is a deduction from their cash flow provided by operating activities. Salaries paid, of course. Insurance paid, interest paid, no? Okay, and then taxes paid, income taxes paid. So these are deductions from the operating activities. So we will have a net balance, net na nga balance pa, no? A net of 2,500,000. So kinuha lang natin yun, no? Okay, now it should be added dun sa cash and cash equivalents, no? Mamaya ipapakita natin. So ito siya, no? So 2.5 million, no? Now, when it comes to net cash used in investing activities, please take note, no, the verb, no? Dito used, yung kanina provided, kasi normally provided, when you say provided, parang nag-increase yung yung balance mo. Well, dito nabawasan kaya used, no? So normally when they pay for the land, pag bumili sila ng land, yung companies for 2 million, no? Okay, so these are deduction from their cash balance, no, coming from their investing activities. Cash receipts from sale of equipment, so that's an addition. So binenta nila, nagbenta sila ng equipment, no? So additional cash yun. Cash receipts from sale of investment, that's 700,000. That is also in addition to their cash balance. And a net negative balance, or net balance, okay, or net amount of 500,000, no? Okay, so used, no? So yung bang payments, no? Kasi negative, no? So we'll now proceed with the financing activity. So these are the examples, no? Cash receipts from issuance of shares. So pag nag-issue sila ng preference share or ng ordinary shares. So that's for 3 million addition to the cash balance, no? Coming from the from the financing activities. Cash received from the bank loan. So this is for 4.5 million. Yan. Okay, so normally you will find this doon sa non-current portion ng liabilities, no? And then yung cash paid for dividends. Yeah, so this is also sa equity yan, no? Sa mga payment dun sa stockholders. Okay, and then cash paid for treasury shares, no? So for 1.6. So these are equity transactions, no? Okay, so those are both deductions. So there's a balance of 2.4 million is positive. So you add them all, no? Magmula dito yung cash and cash equivalents January 1, you can add yung 2.5 million from operating activities, net cash used from investing, and yung net cash used in financing. It's a positive balance. So you will get a cash in cash equivalents as of December 31 of 7.4 million. So, by the way, this is this is provided, not used, okay, because that is okay, so that is well, kasi mas malaki yung positive, so it's provided. Okay. Titignan ko lang kung nahalata niyo. Okay. So if you have any questions, you may write your comments, no? And if you want us to other topics that you want us to discuss, just leave a comment. Of course, like, share, and subscribe. And see you in the next video. God bless and stay safe.